Now, I've had a pretty rough relationship with the God's Not Dead franchise because I can't say that I'm a big fan of the first two. I've made videos on them, I've had my complaints, but I always try to be that guy that when a new product, a new movie, whatever it is, comes out for something, I'm gonna give it the benefit of the doubt, right? I'm gonna go in with that faith of a mustard seed that they can always improve and be better. And sometimes they are. Look, I'm not saying that it's lactose free now, that there are no cheesy moments, right? They still have a lot of issues when it comes to filmmaking in general, right? They still don't know the settings for drone footage. The script in itself isn't the tightest it can be. But the message in the movie is a lot better than what they had in the last two. I'm always open to hearing different points of view, right? Whether they disagree with me or not. I've always found religion in general to be interesting. I've always found the idea of using art to convey a message intriguing, especially depending on how they execute it, right? Like if I were to compare genres, we always see sci-fis, horrors, romances, and what really stands out is when you not only have that specific demographic that likes those movies, but one of those genre movies transcends itself and makes it to the mainstream, right? That story has something special going with it. Christian movies aren't meant to be a genre. Like, Christian movies can be horrors, dramas, love stories, whatever. It's not meant to be a genre, it's meant to be a lifestyle. That's why I've always found it interesting that it was Christians who needed a movie to remind them that God's not dead. And they needed 3 of them. I'm not saying that Christians can't have their cake and eat it too, right? Like I was saying, if you are looking at it from the genre perspective, there are those sci-fi movies that go to a lot of tropes, a lot of those, checking the boxes of what a sci-fi needs to be, and people eat that up. And Christian movies tend to be that. Just have it be a feel-good, Bible verse mentioning Christian film, and there's a demographic for that, no doubt. But for me, if it's supposed to be a lifestyle and y'all got a book and the book tells you make disciples of all nations, I don't know why you guys treat all the non-believers in your movies like Thanos, like they're out to go and burn the world. The believers already believe. You don't have to fish for the ones you already caught. I've always wondered why you ignore the people outside of that. Another part with the first two has always been the persecution complex, right? Like in the second one, they literally took God to court and ruled that he wasn't dead. In both movies, they also did this thing where they showed like court cases at the end, which I guess they thought no one was going to search them up, and I brought this up before. Court cases where they are actually promoting homosexuality unbeknownst to them, but court cases didn't even match the plots of the movie themselves. So I've always found that interesting because why not tell a story that can be more grounded, right? Like, why not tell a story where you aren't scared to show a non-believer, someone in a different religion, who, ain't a mass-murdering rapist and can actually be a decent human being? Why not make a movie where you have the guts to look in the mirror and say, hey, there are some Christians out there who are bad apples. What if we were to tackle something like that? But, if you've ever been in any church, religion in general, you know that there's always that, like, contempt, I want to say, of reaching or learning about anything else outside your faith because they believe like, oh, the moment you open up the Quran, all of a sudden you're going to become Islamic. Like, if you believe that you can be that susceptible, that influenced, then your faith ain't steadfast as the verses that you claim to read out loud so other people can hear you. So with all that in mind, as I went into God's Not Dead 3, with all of the other movies, behind in my brain, all of the Christian movies that I've seen, all of the Christianity that I've dealt with, the years of church, I went into that movie going, oh my heavens, they actually have learned something. I'm not gonna bash a series if they're getting better, right? Like, I'm not defending the last two in any way, shape, or form, but I think that they've learned from their mistakes, and they've kind of pointed it out with this one.
God's Not Dead 3.
It's not God's Not Dead 3. It's God's Not Dead.
God's Not Dead, AR3.
It's God's Not Dead, a light in darkness.
3.
There's no 3.
I mean, it is the third installment. It's following the same character, same storyline, but I get that they're trying to do that because it's almost like they've become self-aware of their criticisms of what they did with the first two movies, and they're trying to take it a different path, of not be like the first two and almost learn from their mistakes, because one of the big things in this movie is the idea of everybody's yelling and no one knows how to shut up and listen. And the fact that they said that from the point of view of a Christian. One of the main plot points that's happening in the movie is the church being forced to get broken down because it's on a college campus, which I found interesting, again, going back to the court cases, because I mean, it was Confederate stuff that was really in the news recently. But what I found super, super intriguing was that by the end of the movie, the man goes, you know what? Why am I fighting for bricks when the bricks ain't the church? It's the people who are the church. And he literally gives up the church, and he's like, why are we fighting and making a bigger deal just for my ego because I want a building? I can go preach anywhere that I can. Let's burn this thing down to the ground and make this a student center to actually help teens who actually need it. In the third act of the movie, the pastor dude goes super crazy, which again is showing that they actually had the balls to show a Christian make mistakes, show a Christian, acting like Kendrick because he didn't believe anyone was praying for him, not forgiven. Man throws a Bible at one point in this movie, and I like that they were showing you, hey, this isn't just a Christian, this is the pastor of the church, and even he's tweaking. Another thing that a lot of these Christian movies do is that they always have an atheist who is mad at God. Like, they're never logically, an atheist because that's based off of the research that they did. It's always because God killed their child or their grandma or their mom. So it's manipulative screenwriting because Christian writers do that. That way you see them as emotionally unstable, and they never have the guts to write, someone who's doing it out of logic. I'm not saying that people don't become atheists because of that, but you don't see them in Christian movies. Well, in this one, they have this kid right here who I think had the most intriguing backstory, because it wasn't that he was unfaithful or not a believer because he was mad at God. He was mad at Christians. His story was that his mom got called a slut and got kicked out of the church because she was the one who got divorced, and then they said she was a whore because of it. Again, it was dissecting the fact that Christians many times are the ones creating their own problems, especially when it comes to reaching for other people who are wavering in their faith or people who are not in the faith at all. And that's where the most intriguing character came into me, which was the lawyer who was also the brother, who was also not in the faith. And they have this one scene in particular where they're yelling at each other. One of them is upset, right? Because his brother left the faith, but also because he left him to tend to the parents by himself. But the other one hits him with this thing about, when I was struggling with my faith, all of you guys treated me like crap and none of you wanted to talk to me, and you guys were the Christians. I was like, oh, they are really getting into this. Have you ever seen that? Christians love the story of the prodigal son, but the moment that someone asks a question about their faith, they go from the child of God to the spawn of Satan. I thought that was one of the best scenes of the movie because it was actually looking at that idea that Christians almost treat it like a clique, and when you leave, right, it's supposed to be, oh no, you're leaving your everlasting life and the love of God, but they treat it like you're disrespecting them. And instead of going, man, this person maybe needs more attention and more care than the people who are already going on Saturdays or Sundays or whatever day it is, they bash you, they kick you out. I've always said that saying because I believe it's true, and I've seen it from all the churches that I've been to. The idea that in Christianity, the worst thing about it are the Christians. I've made several videos dealing with it, right? And one of the main things that people always ask is oh, well, you're an atheist, automatically assuming or saying, oh, if you're not a Christian, you're not. If we speak in logic, we can speak logic, right? The fact that you need someone to be your faith in order to listen to them. Ew. But what I find more interesting is the comments I get from the professing Christians, especially on videos I did one on Christian music, and it was more so about the idea that contemporary Christian music is again genre binding. It's putting Christianity in a box and saying that this is what the contemporary sound is, when other people, that may not be what causes them to worship. It may not be. It was just the idea that it's, again, an industry type of thing. And while you may agree or you may not, what I found most interesting was the comments, the very delightful comments, again, from the lifestyle of Christian people who decided to reach out. God's Not Dead 3 calls out those people, right? The people who were so fast to defend the first two. This movie calls not only its previous two movies out, but it practically calls out the people who did the same thing. That instead of listening to those who are going, those who actually went out to see God's Not Dead, yes, some of them went out to troll, but for those who actually went out, right, and saw on a movie screen from loving Christians, them being bashed and literally killed at the ending of the first one, instead of reaching out and trying to say good things, you got comments like these that were popped out in those videos. And again, while I'm not saying that this movie is Amadeus in any way, shape, or form, I like the fact that it's getting better, you know, with its cameras, a little better actors. I like seeing that there's at least a progression into it, and especially when it comes to the message, right? Because it was all about just be willing to talk to somebody else. Go out and grab a beer with a pastor. Go out and grab a bite to eat, a burger with an atheist. Ignore White Sox fans, but pretty much at the end of the day, reach out to other people and have these discussions, whether they believe in the same thing you do or not. As long as we're stopping people from like doing drugs, stopping violence, just being able to help other people in any way, shape, form that we can, then that should be the goal. I'll even say this. There was a point in this movie that literally almost broke me to tears, because I was watching it, and it was the scene when the lawyer comes in, and when the lawyer comes in and he goes to the house, I was like almost about to cry when I realized that the movie let me figure out for myself that he was the brother. You know, Christian movies are always strong with the exposition. They always got like people coming into a room going, hello, eldest brother of mine who works in accounting. Hello, little sister with the marital problems. Like, they're always pushing it too hard because they don't want the audience to think for themselves. They're getting better, right? Like, that's the only thing I can say. This movie ain't gonna be for everyone, but I guess I had my expectations so low. I guess after seeing the other ones, I guess after, you know, dealing with so many situations like this, that I was surprised that they actually had the balls to critique themselves in the third one.
It's not God's Not Dead 3.
To critique themselves in A Light in Darkness. I'm not saying rush out and go see it. I'm not saying it's going to be for everyone. But what I am saying is that the message of the movie is to stop yelling and listen to other people. And I'm glad they finally did.
So even though we face the difficulties of today and tomorrow, I still have a dream.